This oops, all AI week in IT Sparkcast. The AI zombies are coming. What you need to know. Vibe coding hits the enterprise. And is your IT staff burned out? AI can help.
Oh boy, here we go again.
Greetings and welcome to season 2 of IT Sparkcast News Bytes. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. I'm transmitting from the mobile office over Starlink. As you can see, it's the vacation shirt time. So we're going to have us a good time today.
That's right. And we're starting season 2 out just with a bang while Lou's traveling. It is Monday, August 18th, and IT Sparkcast News Bites is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And let's get right into the News Bites.
Okay, this is a fun one because holy crap, who ever thought zombies would come this way? So I pulled this out of the register. We thought it really resonated. The question is, should the dead have a digital delete button? And the reason we're bringing this up on a more IT-centered newscast is because our digital footprints reach very far beyond what we consider the public domain, right? This information of who I am, some of that exists in every company I have ever worked for. So the question now becomes, we have seen several instances where folks, there was a road rage incident that happened a couple months ago where they actually had a virtual voice AI animated transcription from the victim who was obviously deceased. We've also seen some other cases. Do we have a right to shutting down any use of our likeness and voice when we die? And John, do you have some comments on this?
Yeah, so there's a few different pieces to this, and I think that it's a really good thing to talk about, and it does play into the corporate world as well. So there's your personal rights, and then there's rights you may not be thinking about, and then how that bleeds into the corporate case. So the first of all, the case that Lou was talking about, there was a gentleman named Chris Pelkey who unfortunately passed away as part of a road rage incident back in 2021, and then his attorney and wife brought him back and his image back via AI in order to bring the victim's statement back as part of the sentencing hearing. And there was all kinds of controversy about it, and I won't get into the controversy about it, but at the point that it was technically legal to do so. But then the question is that how would I protect myself in the future from that? How would I protect if I was, so now that technically a personality in a platform, so YouTube or on podcasts, from my image and my content being used in a way posthumously that I may not want it to? How about performers from the movies and TV from 50 years ago, and how did they get protected? In my last company, we had digital versions of some of our presenters using a company and a technology from Synthesia, and we created digital versions of them so that we could create multi-language versions of some of our content. We didn't sign anything. The question is, so when that person leaves the company, what happens? And we kind of had a handshake agreement that we wouldn't do anything unusual or malicious with that content. But if somebody left, technically we still owned those imageries. We could technically still use it. So this leaves a really gray area, and an area that probably should be very, very black and white. So I'm glad that people are starting to think about this, and it's really important that as IT and the owner of those digital assets, that we start bringing some of this to the forefront, get legal involved as people start talking about digital versions of our employees, making sure that this is thought of, because this could end up in getting the company in legal hot water, especially if those assets are misused. And those could be misused in a lot of really ugly ways. We've seen deep fakes and other things. Let's get the company protected. And IT needs to
And
be the forefront of that
honestly,
with legal.
we've already started to see some of the impact of this. I have friends who've taken pictures of their deceased parents and used some of the online tools to sort of animate them. How long is it going to be before you can make an entire movie?
Right.
I think you could probably do it now. The interesting thing is that there are some European laws in place. France and Italy, for example, allow heirs to erase a deceased online data through a central thing. In the United States, it's more of a service by service thing. I know that Facebook has a setup where you can memorialize, set timing, etc. Google has the ability to for you to designate an heir, and they can determine what's going to happen with your data. But given how much of our identity we're actually being asked to extend at a corporate level, I know that the last place we worked, they had like, oh, we want you to be online and tweeting and posting stuff about the company. And I never did it because I'm like, no, that's me, right? I
Right.
control that, not the company. It's my message, not yours. So, but what if I become inadvertently the face of the company? What if I'm the AT&T girl or whatever the heck it is this week, right? Or does that mean that this changes? So this is something when you're looking at your legal hat in IT, this is something you really need to keep an eye on because I think we're probably within 18 months of having a major incident where somebody oversteps the bounds on this one because the tools make it so simple to do. So if you get a chance, even if you're not in IT, this is something you should really think about. What do you want to have happen to your image? It didn't used to be a thing, right? And if you're an
Right.
actor, they now have sort of put that into the standard negotiation when you're dealing with the Actors Guild. But we are all actors and we don't all have a guild.
That's
So,
right.
well, speaking of things that get a little bit vibey, but need to maybe lock down a bit more, John, can you give us an update on what is going on with vibe coding and enterprise?
Sure, absolutely. So it's interesting that we've been hearing about vibe coding, and just as a quick overview, if you're not really familiar with it, vibe coding is the creation of applications and code via prompting. So you don't really necessarily have to know coding. It actually helps if you do and you understand the basics of it because then you can debug better. But you can technically write an application or create an application, I should say, by just prompting a tool to write the code for you. I've done some experiments with it. Usually I have to go in and debug the code myself a little bit, but the tools are getting pretty good at it, and different tools do it at different levels. Now, when it comes to enterprise grade, this is you. We've seen cases where things like plugins for Visual Studio or VS Code will allow you to maybe make changes to code or write snippets of code through prompting, but not necessarily full applications. Well, there's a new platform called Uno, and the company called Uno Platform, based in Montreal, has now started to take that to the next level. So they have a multi-platform application tool that uses it helps you create .NET applications for Windows, for the web, for iOS, Android, and Linux, all from one code base. So it's cross-platform, one code base, all through vibe coding, through prompting. And this has gotten a lot of traction. They've gotten a lot of press, and they just closed their first round of funding for 3.5 million Canadian, which is about 2.5 million US. This was led by AQC Capital and Desjardins. So now this is really interesting. The tool itself actually goes back to 2018, which was open sourced and has received a lot of different contributors. It's got over 300 contributors and has had over 100 million downloads. But then it's spun out as a standalone company in 2023, starting to target the enterprise, and it has customers like Toyota, Microsoft, TradeZero, and others. We heard about this on TechCrunch, which you see on the screen there, but this is now starting to bring vibe coding mainstream, as opposed to a couple of individuals writing some small apps, bringing it to enterprise level coding. This I find is really interesting. Lou, what do you think?
Okay, and one thing I find really interesting about this is they're trying to meld the sort of the structured programming with visibility and security and maintainable architecture, because if you're just throwing code out there, security, visibility, readability, and maintainability aren't in the top 10 of that application, right? It's just like
Yeah.
barfing out code, and maybe you're getting it from different applications that are optimized more towards, and I think we'll see this like, okay, here's an application that does GUIs, here's an application that pulls from APIs, stuff like that. As we start entering more deeper into the agentic era, which
So
we're
let me add some of my own experience to that. So in my experience with vibe coding, in many cases, you actually find that you get very readable, commented, well structured code. So it's really good at adding comments and putting it into a well structured, getting all the right indents and all of that you would expect from like a well structured engineer would do. Where what we talked about in the last episode of last season, though, is that we're finding that a lot of AIs, actually almost all of the AIs, tend to favor structure and speed of delivery over security, right? And what we had found, I believe the number was 45% of the code generated had some sort of security flaw. So, or 45% of the time, there was a security issue. So that's where I think the big problem would come into play here. So we really need to make sure we're taking that into account. And that's where I'd be really worried about this. And that's where, again, you can't solely rely on the AI to build, test, and deliver the code. You
not
need
yet.
some humans and additional testing tools involved instead of just trusting that code is ready to go right out the door.
I think we're going to get there, but I think it's going to take us
Yeah.
quite some time to
Yeah.
develop the tools to the point where they can be trusted, and then evolve the trust in ourselves. It's more than just AI, it's how we adapt to AI. And speaking of that, we have two incidences where we talked about this week, not an incident so much as a news item. We're talking about large companies that are betting on AI driven IT transformation. So this is specifically targeted at us, right? The IT folks. So the first one was General Catalyst, and I got this out of the Wall Street Journal. So when the Wall Street Journal is paying attention to this, they're leading a $74 million investment in a company called Titan, which is a new holding company. Their mission is to transform traditional IT support using AI. So this marks a clear pivot, moving from flashy software as a service startups to the nuts and bolts world of what we got to deal with, right? A lot of what IT has to deal with is not sexy, and we'll read that in a comment, especially if you're in security. It's terrible, right? You're blamed for everything, but you're never resourced the way you have to be. So I saw that. Now, meanwhile, John, what did you find?
Yeah, so I was actually so Lou found this article on the Wall Street Journal. As I was doing research, I went to the Wall Street Journal through Apple News, and I found that there was another company doing almost the exact same thing, and they're helping out the same type of customers, the IT department, and they're called experience ops, so they go by X ops. And again, they're doing the same type of thing. They're helping assist the IT team in getting their things done and helping with burnout and making those mundane tasks. And those of us that have spent any time in IT, we know that a huge amount of our time, matter of fact, when I was in sales, we used to talk about 65% of our resources, and that's the budget and time, were spent just keeping the lights on. That meant firefighting, figuring out where the problem was, figuring out who plugged an Ethernet cable into the same switch and causing a loop, whatever it was, just making sure that things operated and stayed operational. And a lot of that just repetitive, redundant operations that AI could really help with. And so we're finding that there's a lot of different tools out there that are coming and really, taking a look at that and replacing that human middleware. That's actually one of the terms that they were used in the article from XOps. And we'll put both links in the show notes so that you have those.
And so I can say, sort of to wrap a bow on this thing, is that we're now seeing targeted business funds. So, for example, in the case of General Catalyst and their Titan Fund, they've already done an acquisition of something called RFA, Richard Fleischman and Associates, and they're going to do more. So what this brings, though, is it's going to bring a targeted strategic framework to a lot of these really, really useful parts. And that this is tremendously good news for us. Because somebody, it's great if you solve a problem in one area, but the problem with IT is it is an all-encompassing challenge. So you have to solve a whole bunch of problems. And a lot of times when the folks are solving the one problem they're passionate about, maybe they're not thinking about the three other adjacent problems because they're not passionate about those or they don't see them. So you tend to get we tend to look at these venture companies and stuff that overarch this as, oh, they're evil venture companies. Not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that when you think about it, when humans get bored, that's when they start making mistakes. And if you can use the AI to really start taking on those boring, mundane tasks and allow the humans to work on the things that are more interesting, that allows them to be more innovative and creative and pay more attention, then it's kind of that win-win scenario. And again, we keep talking about this. It's not about AI taking your job. It's about making you more efficient at your job and allowing you to do the things that are more interesting, and having an AI that doesn't really care about getting bored do those mundane things that you really just didn't want to do, those repetitive tasks that we all hate doing. All right, and as we're getting ready to wrap up, Lou has some feedback from one of our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a comment, one of our last CVE of the weeks, where we talked about the security breach on the lady safety dating app T. Then he mentioned that I have a lot of people who look outside of IT industry I work in and ask me why I'd rather be a network engineer than not working in ITsec or InfoSec. And he says, because InfoSec gets blamed for everything. And I agree, you do. And they're always going to get scapegoated. We're obviously going to call these folks out because these were some pretty egregious errors. But I'd like to remind everyone, he brings up, he or she, I should say, I don't know, it's on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. But the thing is, we don't know if they asked for the proper resources and didn't get them. Because if you've worked in security long enough, you know that happens. So the only takeaway advice I can really give you here is, when this happens to you, because it will, it's happened to me, it's happened to John, put it in an email and save that email. Okay? Documentation will save your tuchus. If you gave them the right advice and they decided they'd rather use that money for another marketing campaign, make sure you get it in writing every time.
Right.
That you requested, even if you write it down yourself. So that was a great comment and a really, really good lesson. And
make sure that email exchange or that paper trail includes your version of, these are the ramifications if we don't do this, so that you are covered when that does happen. So yes, that way you have warned it and you've got a written trail for that. But that is going to cover this episode, and we couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We do want to hear what you think. Do you have any other topics that you want us to cover? Do you have anything else you want us to talk about? Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com or hit us up on X @itsparkcast. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. As you just heard, we read every single piece of feedback and every comment, and we respond to most. If you do send in a comment and it's particularly insightful, we'll read it out on one of our episodes, and you might hear your name and your comment on one of our broadcasts. So make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That way you never miss an episode. And with that, from the world of enterprise IT and season 2, take care.
Thanks for coming around and listening.